Hi there, Mark here again. Welcome to part 3 of my build guide for the Tamiya Terra Scorcher. Let's see where we got to last time. So here's the front and rear gearbox and suspension assemblies. That's all ready to go. Notice there's no shocks on, so we're going to start this part now with step 24, which is building the rear dampers. Okay, so as usual, I've already made up one of them. They're exactly the same, obviously. So that's the first one completed. Nice and smooth and quite a bit of damp in there. What I normally find is with the Tamiya builds that the damping's a bit too soft for my liking, so I've adapted this one. I'll show you how I've changed the fronts as well. You get this X2, which is your piston with 2 holes. I'm going to keep it with the 2 holes, but instead of using the standard damper oil with the kit, which I think is 400, number 400, I'm using a 700, so it's going to be a bit firmer, but you can see that's quite a nice amount of damp in there, so I'll go with that. We can always tune it later. So very quickly we'll whiz through this. You need to get your BB18, which is the rod. It's the darker of the two. There's the silver ones for the front. Put on your E-clip onto the bottom of the slots. Put your piston on top, making sure you've cut off the little tabs that it shows you to cut off there, so it's nice and smooth. And we need to get the other E-clip and put it on the top. Okay, once we've done that, we can get the shock body, which is a Y1, and then we need to put in the O-rings, which are these orange ones. Always put a bit of oil in the body first, just to make sure everything's sealed up with those rings. You don't need too much. So put the first one in, a bit more oil, then you've got a yellow spacer, which is an X1, and the other O-ring, a bit more oil, and the other X1 spacer, and then screw the bottom on. But again, don't tighten this up yet because we need to put the rod through. So this is the way I do it. It's a bit back to front, rear to out says. So now that's done, I'm going to put the rod in from the top after putting some oil in to help reduce the amount of bubbles I get. So just pop my finger over the hole, stop the oil coming out, and I'm going to top that up and simply get the rod and pop it through the hole at the bottom. You'll need a rag now because oil will go everywhere. So the oil coming up through the holes, again, very few bubbles now. There's only a couple in there and they're disappearing, which is fine. Get the black BB29 cap, and yeah, more oil comes out. Just clean that off and then screw on your top cap. And again, now we can screw these up against each other nice and tight, not too tight though, because they do kind of click over the threads if you go too mad with these, I've noticed. Okay, so that shock seems to be working okay. So put on your flange nut, make sure it's kind of upside down, if you know what I mean, with the flange pointing down. Screw that all the way. Get your rear spring. Then you need to get part X8, which is the bottom of the shock. Screw that on as far as it'll go. Hold the bottom of that eye, and we can get some pliers and tighten up that flange nut. Again, don't go too mad tightening that up, just a nip up will do. And then to finish this off, it says put on spacers X3 and X4. So whizzing on to step 28, which is making the front shocks. I won't show you that because it's basically exactly the same. They are smaller, but obviously follow the part numbers. The only difference is we haven't got a flange nut on this bottom piece. It just screws on like most Tamiya shocks. And again, like I said, I've made mine a little bit stiffer. It says to use the V7, which is the piston with 3 holes in it. I use the one with 2 holes, and then the standard kit supplied 400 oil, damper oil. And again, it seems to work quite smoothly. There's a fair amount of damping. Again, I can always fine tune this when we run the car. Okay, so that's all the shocks done. So I need to whiz back now to step 27, which is attaching the rear shocks. So get your rear gearbox and suspension assembly. You're going to need 4 3x27 screws, 4 flange nuts, 4 of the brass damper mounts, and you need 2 D3, which are the blue plastic spacers. So your damper mount goes through the shock top, and you need your long screw and your flange nut on the back through there, and then at the bottom again the brass mount, we need the screw and that blue spacer, and it shows in the diagram to fix this into the last hole in the bottom wishbone. Secure that screw with one of the flange nuts. So simply tighten all these up, and the same for the other side, and that's your finished rear assembly. Whizzing on to step 31, which is fitting the fronts. It's very similar to fitting the rear shocks. I've already fitted the one there. Again, we're going to need the 27mm screw, your shock, we're going to need that brass shock spacer or damper mount. Put the screw through like so into the top shock mount and fit the flange nut onto the back. Again, brass damper mount into the bottom from the back. This time we're going to have a spacer again, but it's a black G7 spacer that goes behind that. So again, put 27mm screw through and spacer, and again the stock setting is to mount on the last hole in that lower suspension arm. Secure that with the other lock nut, and your finished front assembly should look like this. Again, shocks moving freely, everything nice and damped. So it's on to opening parts bag C. So on to step 24, out of parts bag C now. This will get us to the end of the build. You just need BC9, which is the black ball connector, and it says that screw there, but whichever screw fits your servo. So you need to wire everything up to your servo, turn your transmitter on and your receiver, make sure that the servo is in neutral, so in the central position, and then basically follow this part here with the P plastic parts. Depending on the servo you've got, you need your servo saver ring, then you need this part P2. Into that you put that black ball connector, and on the back you've got a tiny 2mm screw that holds that in place. As I say, whichever screw fits your servo with the little P1 washer in there, and that's basically that part finished. So quickly over to the next page, steps 33. You need to fit on parts B11, which are going to attach the servo to the chassis. But if you look at this nut here, you've got to make sure this gap here between the back of the servo there, the servo mount, and the front of your servo saver, if it's less than 20mm, you need to turn this B part round, but mine's over 20, so I've got it in the position you can see there with the cutout at the bottom. So that's ready to go in the tub now. So that's the first time we get the tub out. Here we go. So we're going to put this in with some 3x12 screws and some washers through these two holes there and there. Okay, so there's the two screws in place. Put the one in just the hole first and the one in the slot second, and that's the servo mounted. Now we're going to fit in the electrics or electronics. So we're going to put in my receiver and my ESC. I'm just going to stick them in place. I'll show you that in a sec. Put your switch through this hole here, and there's the two screws and the washers that you need to fix that switch in. So with that, we're ready for step 34. This is attaching the battery holders and we've also got this part here, which is a G6, which I think holds the back of the body down. I'm going to stick this, as it shows there, cut to 35mm long, and just stick that underneath this part, G6. So that's that fitted. Now we're just going to put these B17s on, so they fit on the inner of the lugs on here, and we just need to attach that with a 3B8 and a washer, and the same for the other side, apart from this time it looks like the screw goes in the back, so I think that flips up and that allows you to get the battery in and out. So with that, on to step 35, which is simply making up the steering rods. So you make one of the shorter ones, which is for the steering linkage, and then you make two of the longer ones, which are the actual steering arms. So that's the one. Just quickly knock up the second one. Best if you hold it on the hex with a pair of pliers, I find. And again, the one that screws all the way up to the hex is normal right-handed thread. Screw that on as normal, and then when we turn it round, the thread that doesn't go all the way to the hex is a left-handed thread, so we screw that as if we're unscrewing, and that will actually do it up. And just adjust that so it matches the diagram. So we're going to need these again for step 36, where we're going to attach the steering rods. We need two 3x15mm screws. You need these parts B7, which are the steering arms themselves, and I've put in the BB12s, which are your 5mm brass ball connectors. Now those are fitted to a BA8, which is a 3mm nut that you can probably see in there. So that just slots in, that's captive, so you don't need a spanner on it. Pop it in and just do up the ball joint, and it's the same on both arms. Okay, once you've done that, we need BC11, which is your tie rod, and now we're going to fit this into the chassis tub. We're going to need two of these brass flanges, the BB17s, and we need two more flange nuts. Okay, so get your chassis tub, turn it upside down. So as these are both the same, the one that we're going to fit on the right hand side as we're looking at it here, you need to put another ball connector in the middle there of B7 with the nut pointing down, and then put your ball connector in like so. Again, this is really soft plastic, so don't tighten it too much. Get your damper mount, one of your 15mm screws, goes through the back hole, like so, and then that goes into the chassis just there. And then what we need to do is put the flange nut on the other end, which is going to be quite tricky now all the electronics are in the way. Okay, so that's one side done. Now you need to get your tie rod, pop that under and through the hole just in front of that ball joint, and this rib on the body is going to stop that from falling out. So before we fit this one, again the nut facing downwards, put your brass bushing in, you screw, and make sure that you put that hole through the tie rod before we screw it up. Okay, so you might be able to see I've got both the nuts on there. It was quite tricky to do, I must admit, with this in the way. It probably would have been easier in hindsight to have done this, put this on before fitting the servo, but hey, I followed the manual, I've got it fitted now. All we need to do to finish this off is to put the steering arms on and the shorter connecting rod. It's showing put the hex adjuster to the left for this, and to finish this step we just click on the steering arms themselves, making sure that the hex adjuster is pointing to the left as we look at it now on both sides, like so. Step 37, we're going to attach the rear gearbox. So we need to get that, and you need 6 of the BA3 3B12s, and we're just going to put all these in place where it shows in the diagram. So first thing we need to do is to get them lined up, and what you need to do is push it in from underneath, because these have got kind of a recess in these mounts at the bottom, so you need to come in from underneath like so. It's quite fiddly to get into place, but once it's there you'll know. So I'm just going to get the screws in and I'll show you where they are in a sec. I've just put them in loosely for now so you can see where they are. There's one there, there and there at the top, and then the opposite on this side, one there above the motor and one there under the motor. So I'll get those done up and it's on to step 38, which is attaching the front gearbox. Now, made a bit of a rookie mistake here. You might notice I've moved my receiver. Yeah, of course the drive shaft has to come down here, so ignore what I said before. You can't use this space, duh, it's for the drive shaft. So anyway, that was quickly solved. Luckily I'd got on some Velcro anyway, so yeah, just so I can swap that out. Anyway, don't do what I did. Put the receiver where it tells you to. Okay, so we need to get the front gearbox, get it lined up, and what we need to do is first put your drive shaft in. You can't get it in afterwards, so if you need to change the drive shaft you've got to take off the front gearbox or the back gearbox. So what we're going to do is, like I say, AW grease the ends up into that prop drive, and then we've got to get the front lined up and get that prop in the drive in the front. And then you've got another one right down here just above the steering linkage. You can see that one. And then one on the other side. Okay, so that's there, there, there and down there. We'll just get those in and we'll go on to the next step. Step 39 is simply attaching the front bumper and just snapping on the end of the steering arms onto the actual steering balls there. So that's just an easy pop on. And for the bumper you need 2 3B12 self tappers, which are going to go into the chassis. So we'll just get those in first. Once they're in, you need the 2 10mm machine screws. They're going to screw into the 2 flange nuts, which are going to go on the top here. Okay, step 40 is making up the driver figure, and 41 is putting the battery pack in, but I won't show that because that's quite easy. To show you can use the straps provided, which are these, to hold the battery in. We're going to go straight on to step 43, and we're going to mount the wheels in 44, which is basically you just rise the tyres onto the rims, basically 4 of. Very simple. I've also put a bit of white paint on the lettering just to set it off a little bit. So all I'm going to do now to finish off this part of the guide, I think, is to get these mounted, and we'll have a rolling chassis. So for this we need the little drive pins, which are BC10s, those, and you need those triangular C2 pieces, which are the wheel adapters. Pop the pin through the hole in the shaft and place the adapter over the shaft so it locks in place. You need your BC8 wheel nut. Any of the wheels will do, they're all the same. Make sure they line up with these lugs into the 3 holes in the wheel. Yep, you can feel it when it's connected. So there we have all 4 wheels fitted. It's looking pretty good now, so that's the whole chassis done. And I think I've got the suspension about right with the damping, so yeah, just do a drop. It feels pretty good. I'm really pleased with the way this has come out. It's looking like a pretty sweet buggy now, I think. Anyway, that's enough for this part. I think I've gone on too long again, so hopefully you'll join me on the next part where we'll get that driver finished and get the bodywork done. So thanks for following along again, and hope to see you on the next one. Bye.